The rain hammered the city as if the sky itself had turned against her. Emma Reed pressed her forehead to the cool window of the cab, her reflection a blur of mascara smudges and red-rimmed eyes. The exhibition was supposed to be her chance, her leap into the world she had dreamed about since she was 18. Instead, it had been 3 lonely hours in a hollow gallery, her canvases staring back at her like disappointed children. 3 guests had come. 3. One was her neighbor who only stayed long enough to finish the free wine, another ducked in to escape the rain, and the last had asked for the restroom before vanishing. The humiliation still burned. When the cab pulled up to the downtown hotel, she almost told the driver to keep going. She didn't belong in a place like this. Gilded chandeliers in the lobby, velvet chairs, polished marble floors. But the thought of her cramped apartment with its peeling wallpaper was unbearable. She couldn't face the silence yet. She wanted noise. She wanted distraction. She wanted to feel like she hadn't completely failed. The bar was dimly lit, shadows softened by amber lamps, the hum of low conversation mixing with the clink of glasses. Emma slipped onto a stool near the window, ordered the cheapest red wine they offered, and tried to ignore the ache in her chest. The glass trembled slightly in her hand, the way her career now trembled on the edge of collapse. "You look like someone just stole your stars," a voice said, smooth and warm, cutting through the fog of her thoughts. Emma turned, and the sight nearly knocked the breath out of her. The man beside her was striking in a way that felt deliberate. Dark hair, slightly unruly from the storm outside. A face carved from sharp lines, softened only by the depth of his midnight eyes. He wore his confidence like a perfectly tailored suit, the kind that never wrinkled, never failed. Turd, she thought immediately. Expensive. His shirt was crisp, the cufflinks understated but gleaming, the kind of detail that whispered of wealth and a life spent on the other side of glass doors she'd never even touched. "Rough night," he added, taking the stool beside her without waiting for an invitation. He lifted a finger and within moments the bartender was setting 2 fresh glasses on the bar. "Make hers a double." Emma raised her eyebrows. "Ordering for strangers now?" "Only when they look like they need it," he replied easily. And for the first time that evening, Emma laughed. It wasn't a pretty laugh, too sharp, too tired, but it cracked something inside her. They talked, or rather, she talked, about the exhibition that had gone nowhere, the paintings that had consumed her soul, the dream that was dissolving faster than the wine in her glass. He listened, really listened, his dark gaze never wandering, his silence steady as if every word she spoke mattered. No empty reassurances, no patronizing nods, just attention. It was intoxicating. The more she spoke, the lighter she felt, as if with each confession the storm outside bled into the storm within her. And the more he listened, the more the pull between them thickened, until the air itself seemed electric. His knee brushed hers beneath the small table, his cologne, cedar, and rain drifted close. And suddenly Emma realized how near he was, how the bar had shrunk into a private orbit where only the 2 of them existed. She told herself it was just the wine, just loneliness, just one night. When he asked if she lived nearby, her heart answered before her head could intervene. The walk to her apartment was a blur of neon lights smeared by rain. His presence at her side was steady, a shadow she welcomed. At her door she hesitated, keys clutched in a trembling hand. But he leaned close and whispered, "You can change your mind." She didn't. Inside, her tiny apartment seemed different under his gaze, less shabby, more intimate. When he touched her, her hand, her hair, the curve of her back, it was with a reverence she hadn't expected, as though she was something fragile and luminous. Their kiss was tentative at first, a question hanging between them. Then it deepened, urgent and consuming, until she was lost in it, lost in him. Later, tangled in sheets that smelled of paint and turpentine, Emma lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. She told herself she wouldn't remember him, that this was a fleeting mistake, a reckless grasp at feeling alive. She'd wake tomorrow and find him gone, just as he promised. And when morning came, she was right. No note, no number, only the faint trace of cedar and rain on her pillow, and the memory of a night that felt too real to forget, too dangerous to mean nothing. A mistake, she told herself again, but as she stood before her blank canvas later that day, brush trembling in her hand, Emma knew mistakes weren't supposed to feel like this. The morning light crawled across Emma's apartment like an uninvited guest, reminding her of everything she wanted to forget. The sheets were still tangled where Nathan had been, and the faint trace of his cologne lingered on the pillow, cedar and rain clinging stubbornly as if mocking her. She pressed her face into the fabric for a moment before forcing herself to stand. He was gone, just as she knew he would be. No note, no number, no explanation. It should have been easy to tuck the memory away like a secret she never planned to tell, but instead it clung to her skin like paint that refused to wash off. Emma tried to work, tried to lose herself in the familiar comfort of her canvases, but every brushstroke betrayed her. Without thinking, her hand traced the sharp line of his jaw, the depth of his eyes, the curve of his mouth, when he smiled. She cursed under her breath, but the painting refused to change. Nathan's face stared back at her, raw and unfiltered, carrying the weight of a night she had convinced herself was meaningless. She told herself to destroy it, to cover it with thick black paint until nothing remained, but she couldn't. The canvas had a pulse of its own, and it beat in rhythm with her chest. Days turned into weeks. The world moved forward, but Emma felt trapped in a loop. Every corner of the city reminded her of him. A glimpse of dark hair at a crosswalk, the scent of rain on a stranger's jacket, the sudden echo of his voice in her memory, low and steady, telling her she mattered. She hated herself for how often she replayed their conversations, how often she relived the way his hand had brushed her neck when he helped with her coat. It was reckless, pathetic, and yet she couldn't stop. Her bank account told a crueler story. Rent was due again, the envelope on the kitchen counter glaring at her like a threat. The electricity bill lay beneath it, a reminder of just how close she was to losing even the small world she had carved for herself. Selling a painting was no longer a dream, it was survival. She thought of the portrait she had hidden in the corner of her studio, Nathan's face immortalized in shades of longing and loss. It was the best thing she had ever created, the most honest piece she had ever dared to show the world. And yet, the idea of anyone else seeing it filled her with dread. It wasn't just art. It was confession. When the invitation to the city's annual art competition arrived, Emma stared at it for hours. The prize money was enough to cover 3 months of rent, maybe more if she stretched it carefully. She knew her chances were slim. The competition was infamous for its ruthlessness, filled with established names and well-connected artists who belonged in glittering ballrooms, not peeling apartments. But she had no other choice. Either she entered or she watched her life collapse around her. That night she stood in her studio, staring at the hidden portrait. Her fingers brushed the edge of the canvas, and she felt the air shift. Showing it meant exposure. It meant someone else would see how much one night had marked her. It meant surrendering the privacy of her heart. But keeping it in the shadows meant letting her chance slip away. She pulled the portrait into the light. Nathan's dark eyes met hers from the canvas, and for a heartbeat she almost swore he was alive inside the paint. It was reckless, maybe even dangerous, but she knew what she had to do. Emma whispered into the quiet room, a vow she barely believed herself. One night was supposed to mean nothing, but maybe it had left her with something greater than she ever imagined. The storm had only begun. The day of the competition arrived like a storm she could not outrun. Emma stood before her mirror, adjusting the strap of her black dress for the 10th time. It was the only decent dress she owned, bought years ago for interviews that had led nowhere. The fabric clung tighter than she remembered, and the hem felt too plain compared to the glittering gowns she imagined the other artists would wear. Still, it was all she had. She painted her lips a brave shade of red, though her hands trembled as she set the tube down. Tonight could change everything, or it could crush her for good. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel shimmered against the night sky, a palace of glass and light. Valets in crisp uniforms opened doors for polished couples stepping out of sleek cars. Emma slipped inside alone, clutching her portfolio like a shield. The ballroom was a world she had never belonged to, dripping with chandeliers and lined with silk drapes. Artworks hung on the walls like jeweled trophies, each piece framed with pride, each artist standing nearby in tailored confidence. She found her painting already hung, Nathan's portrait lit by a soft glow that gave life to the depths of his eyes. Her chest tightened. What if someone recognized him? What if the wrong eyes lingered too long? She hovered in the corner, trying to be invisible, her heart thudding against her ribs with every passing stranger who paused at the canvas. A critic in a gray suit stopped before it, tilting his head. He whispered something to his companion, and they both scribbled in small notebooks. Emma's stomach knotted. She wanted to run, to tear the portrait from the wall before anyone else could dissect it. Yet at the same time, a fragile pride bloomed. This was her truth, her best work. The crowd thickened as the evening progressed. Waiters glided through with trays of champagne and delicate bites Emma dared not touch. She caught snippets of conversations about auctions, galleries, million-dollar collectors. She tried to drown in anonymity, but fate was cruel. A woman with silver hair, draped in a gown that glittered like stars, stopped in front of the portrait. Her gaze was sharp and unrelenting, her posture commanding attention even in silence. Emma watched from a distance, frozen. The woman studied every brushstroke as though searching for secrets hidden beneath the paint. Finally, she turned and scanned the room until her eyes landed on Emma. "Did you paint this?" the woman asked, her voice rich with power and certainty. Emma nodded, her throat too tight to form words. "It is extraordinary," the woman said. "It bleeds with passion, pain, and something more. Love, perhaps." Emma's cheeks burned, but she could not deny the truth. "I am Victoria Cross," the woman continued, extending her hand with elegance. "I would like to buy this piece." Emma's breath caught. The name meant nothing to her, but the weight in the room shifted when it was spoken. Heads turned, whispers spread. She was someone important, someone who commanded respect. Before Emma could respond, another voice cut through the air, smooth and unmistakable. "Mother, has the schedule changed?" Emma froze. That voice, that tone. She turned slowly, and the world tilted beneath her feet. Nathan stood behind Victoria, dressed in a tuxedo that fit like it was sewn into his skin. His hair was styled, his face composed, but his eyes betrayed him. Shock flared when they met hers, recognition sparking like fire in the shadows. Emma gripped the nearest table to steady herself. Nathan Cross. The name spread through the ballroom like a ripple. She had seen it in headlines attached to skyscrapers and industries she could barely comprehend. And now he stood before her, the stranger from her bed, the mistake she swore to forget, revealed as one of the most powerful men in the city. Victoria gestured proudly toward the painting. "This is Emma Reed, the artist. Her work will be the jewel of my collection." Nathan's face drained of color as his gaze locked on the portrait. His portrait. His midnight eyes staring back at him from the canvas, intimate and undeniable. Emma's pulse thundered. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the floor and escape the eyes of the entire room, but Nathan's voice came quiet, controlled, almost dangerous. "We've met." Suspense hung heavy in the air. The night she thought was a mistake had just become the secret neither of them could run from. The ballroom air grew thick, heavy with the weight of recognition. Emma could feel the shift in the crowd, the way whispers curled around her like smoke. Nathan's eyes burned into her across the space, a silent storm no one else seemed to see. Victoria Cross smiled at her son, unaware of the tension stretching between them like a blade pulled taut. "Come see it, Nathan," Victoria said brightly. "It is the most stirring work I have seen in years." Emma wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Nathan moved closer, his polished shoes soundless on the marble. His face was composed, but his eyes were fierce dark pools that trapped her. He stopped before the portrait, staring at it as though it might betray him to the entire room. Every brushstroke she had poured onto the canvas revealed the man she had met that night, not the billionaire in tailored armor, but the stranger who had listened, who had touched her like she mattered. Victoria's gaze flicked between them, sharp as a hawk. Her smile lingered, but her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "How interesting. You two already know each other." Emma's throat felt dry, her heart pounding so loud she was sure others could hear. She opened her mouth, but Nathan spoke first, his voice low, controlled. "Yes, we have met." The words were safe, yet the way he said them carried meaning no one else could decode. Emma's stomach twisted. The walls of the ballroom seemed to close in silk drapes, suffocating chandeliers, blinding. Nathan's hand brushed against hers as if guiding her subtly toward the side of the room, a command disguised as a gesture. Victoria watched them with unsettling sharpness before nodding slowly. "Perhaps you two would prefer some privacy. There is a room upstairs away from prying eyes." Her tone was smooth, but laced with implication. Emma's legs trembled, but Nathan placed his hand gently at her lower back, leading her out of the crowd. The touch sent a current through her skin, pulling her into a storm she could no longer avoid. Guests turned to watch their exit, murmurs rising like a tide. The private room upstairs was smaller, but no less opulent, deep burgundy wallpaper, gilded mirrors, a fire crackling in the grate. Nathan closed the door and the ballroom noise melted away, leaving only the hiss of flames and the thrum of her heartbeat. For a moment, neither spoke. Nathan stood by the window, framed in city lights, his profile carved in steel. Emma stood near the fireplace, her hands clenched tight around her clutch as if it could shield her from what was coming. "You painted me," Nathan finally said, his voice low, raw, almost dangerous. Emma swallowed hard. "I couldn't stop. That night it stayed with me." His eyes closed briefly, as though the confession struck him deeper than he wanted to admit. "You should not have. Do you know what you've done bringing this here, exposing me like this?" Her anger flared hot enough to burn through her fear. "Exposing you. That was my truth, Nathan, my art, my soul. I had nothing left but that painting. It saved me." He turned to face her, the polished mask slipping just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the billionaire. His jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with a conflict he couldn't hide. "You don't understand, Emma. My world devours people like you." "Then let it try," she shot back, her voice shaking but steady. "Because I won't erase what happened between us. Not for you, not for anyone." For a long moment, silence pressed between them, sharp and breathless. Nathan took a step closer, then another, until he was in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating off him. His hand lifted to her face, his thumb brushing the corner of her mouth as if to silence her doubts. His eyes locked onto hers, fierce and haunted. "That night was not a mistake," he whispered, "and I have not stopped thinking about you since." Emma's pulse raced. The storm outside rattled against the windows, but the greater storm was inside the room, swirling between them, threatening to consume them both. The firelight flickered across the room, painting Nathan's face in shadows and gold. Emma's breath caught as his words hung between them, a confession that both ignited and terrified her. He had not stopped thinking about her. It was everything she had secretly longed to hear, and everything she was not prepared for. Emma stepped back instinctively, her spine pressing against the cold wall. The space between them was small, but it gave her a fraction of distance to breathe. "If you haven't stopped thinking about me, then why did you leave without a word? Why disappear like I was nothing more than one night to be forgotten?" Nathan's jaw tightened, his polished composure cracking. "Because I had to. You don't know what it means to be part of my life, Emma. Every move I make is watched. Every face I'm seen with becomes a headline." That night, it was supposed to be a moment outside of all of this. He gestured toward the glittering city beyond the tall windows, the skyscrapers glowing like watchful eyes. Her chest tightened with anger and hurt. "So you decided for both of us. You decided I wasn't strong enough or worth the risk." His eyes softened, the storm inside them visible now. "I decided because I know what happens to people who get close to me. I have already watched someone be destroyed by it. Catherine was her name. She was kind ordinary. The press tore her life apart until she could barely walk down the street without cameras shoved in her face. She left because she couldn't survive it. I let her down. I won't let that happen to you." Emma's heart pounded. The pain in his voice was real, but so was her fury. "You don't get to cage me in the name of protection. Maybe I'm not Catherine. Maybe I get to decide if I can handle it. Nathan closed the distance in 2 strides, his presence overwhelming, but his touch careful as his hand lifted to her cheek. And what if you regret it? What if you lose yourself in the madness of my world? Your art, Emma, that fire in you. The scrutiny would suffocate it. They will tear apart every part of you until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Her voice broke, but she held her ground. Then let me burn for it. Because what I felt that night was real, and I will not spend the rest of my life pretending it didn't matter. Nathan's hand dropped, and for a moment the silence was deafening. The fire popped, throwing sparks into the air. He looked at her like a man at war with himself, half desperate to pull her into his arms, half determined to push her away. Finally, he whispered, one chance, one dinner, no photographers, no critics, no society eyes, just us. If you still want this after that, then maybe I'll believe you. Emma's throat went dry, but her heart soared with reckless hope. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. Nathan leaned in close, his breath brushing her ear, a mixture of temptation and warning. But understand this, Emma. If you step into my world, there is no turning back. You will carry both the fire and the scars. Her pulse thundered, and yet she whispered back, then show me. For the first time, his mask slipped completely. A rare smile tugged at his mouth, soft and devastating. He pressed a fleeting kiss against her forehead before stepping back, forcing the distance again. The knock on the door jolted them both. Victoria's voice floated in from the hallway, measured and curious. Nathan, darling, are you keeping our guest all to yourself? Emma's blood ran cold. She realized in that instant that Victoria had seen more than she let on. The game had already begun, and the walls of Nathan's world were closing in around her. Emma's pulse raced as Victoria's voice echoed through the heavy door. Nathan's eyes hardened, and for a brief second she glimpsed the ruthless man beneath the polished charm. He crossed the room in long strides and opened the door with deliberate calm. Victoria stood in the hallway like a queen, surveying her kingdom, her silver gown catching the firelight. I was beginning to wonder if my son had forgotten his manners, she said smoothly, though her gaze flicked past Nathan and landed on Emma with unnerving precision. Is everything all right in here? Everything is fine, Mother, Nathan replied, his voice clipped but controlled. We were discussing her painting. Victoria's eyes lingered on Emma, sharp as glass. A knowing smile curved her lips as though she could read every unspoken word that passed between them. Indeed, the painting is remarkable. But what strikes me more is how it captures a side of you, Nathan, I have not seen in years. Vulnerable. Human. Emma's stomach twisted. She wanted to speak, but Nathan's hand brushed lightly against her arm, a warning to stay silent. Victoria tilted her head, her diamonds glinting in the soft light. Careful, Emma. When you paint a man's soul, you risk becoming entangled in it. And my son's soul is heavier than most. Her words were wrapped in silk, but her meaning was a blade. After she left, closing the door softly behind her, the silence roared. Emma turned to Nathan, her voice breaking. She knows. She knows something happened between us. Nathan pressed a hand against the mantel, his shoulders tense. She suspects. My mother always suspects. And once she suspects, she never lets go. Emma stepped closer, her fear laced with defiance. Then why not tell her? Why keep pretending? What are you protecting me from this time? His eyes snapped to hers, fierce and unyielding. From becoming a weapon. My mother would use you to control me. The board would spin stories about you. Rivals would dig through your past, searching for ways to break you just to wound me. Do you understand, Emma? In my world, affection is weakness and love is leverage. Her voice trembled, but her spirit did not falter. Then let them try. I am not afraid of them, Nathan. What terrifies me is the thought of walking away from you and never knowing what could have been. His composure cracked, his jaw tightening, his hands curling into fists. He moved toward her, closing the distance until she felt his breath on her skin. You think you are ready for this, but you have no idea how merciless it gets. There are cameras waiting to expose you, lies waiting to poison you, enemies waiting to destroy you. Just because you matter to me. Emma's chest heaved, but her eyes held his. Then let me matter, because that night was not a mistake, and neither is this. Nathan's hand lifted trembling as it cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. His eyes burned with something between desire and despair. You don't know what you are asking for, Emma. Once you step into this world, you can never return to the life you had before. Then let me step in, she whispered, because maybe my old life was already gone the moment I met you. For a long moment, he just stared at her, torn between surrender and resistance. Then his hand dropped and he turned away, his voice low, rough. Tomorrow night. My house. No masks, no society, no cameras. One dinner. After that, if you still want this, then I will believe you. Emma's breath caught a mixture of fear and exhilaration swirling inside her. Tomorrow night, everything would change. But as Nathan's eyes darkened with unspoken battles, she realized the danger was no longer outside pressing in. The real danger was already here in the fire between them, threatening to consume them both. The night of their dinner arrived, cloaked in tension. Emma stood outside Nathan's townhouse, staring up at its towering windows, glowing faintly against the dark. It wasn't a house at all. It was a fortress made of stone and glass, the kind of place that spoke of generations of wealth and power. She hesitated on the steps, her hands trembling against the clutch she held. A voice inside her whispered to turn back, to retreat into the safety of her anonymity. But another voice, louder, steadier, urged her forward. The door opened before she could knock. Nathan stood there in a dark suit without a tie, his hair slightly tousled as though he had run a hand through it too many times. He looked less like the untouchable billionaire and more like the man from the bar, the one who had made her laugh, and she thought she never would again. His eyes softened when they met hers, but the weight behind them remained heavy. You came, he said quietly, as if surprised she had not run. I said I would, Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Inside the townhouse, the air was rich with the scent of cedar and leather. The walls were lined with books and art, though each piece was so carefully placed it felt more like a curated museum than a home. Yet the dining room was intimate, lit only by candles flickering across polished wood and silverware. The table was set for two, a bottle of wine waiting. They sat across from one another, and for a time there was silence, broken only by the clink of cutlery. But silence with Nathan was never empty. It pulsed with the things unsaid, the questions Emma wanted to ask but feared the answers to. Finally, she could not bear it. Why me, Nathan? Out of everyone you could have chosen, why did you sit beside me that night? He looked at her long and hard, his jaw tightening before he spoke. Because you looked like the world had broken you, and I knew exactly how that felt. His words disarmed her. She had expected charm or evasion, not raw honesty. Her throat tightened. You listened to me that night like I mattered. No one has ever done that before. You do matter, Emma, he said, leaning forward, his eyes catching the candlelight. That is the problem. The more you matter to me, the more dangerous it becomes for you. Before she could answer, a sound shattered the fragile cocoon they had built, a phone vibrating against the table. Nathan glanced at the screen and his face hardened. He silenced it, but Emma saw the name flash before it disappeared. A member of his board, the world outside clawing its way in. Business never leaves you alone, does it? Emma said softly. Not when people are waiting to see me fail, Nathan replied, his voice sharp. Arp. He leaned back, but his eyes never left hers. There are rivals watching my every move, waiting for weakness. If they find out about you, they will use you, Emma. You will become their weapon against me. Her heart pounded, but she held his gaze. And if I say I don't care? If I say you are worth the storm? He stood abruptly, pacing toward the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. You don't know what you're saying. You think it's just the press, but it's more than that. Deals worth billions depend on my image. Every ally, every enemy will see you as leverage. I can fight them, but I cannot protect you from being dragged into the crossfire. Emma rose too, her pulse hammering. Then let me fight beside you, because walking away from this is already destroying me more than any headline ever could. Nathan turned, his face etched with turmoil. For a heartbeat, he looked ready to argue, but then his defenses faltered. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her against him, his lips crashing onto hers with desperation that stole her breath. It was not the controlled, measured man she had seen in the ballroom, but the one who had kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, his voice a whisper, raw and broken. "If we do this, there is no going back, Emma. Once you are in my world, there will be blood on the walls and shadows in every corner. Do you understand?" Her answer was steady, her hands clutching his jacket as if anchoring herself. "I understand, and I am not afraid." But as the candles flickered and the storm outside raged harder, Emma felt a chill crawl down her spine. Because deep down, she knew Nathan's warning was not a metaphor. Shadows already moved around them, and the real battle was only beginning. The following morning, the world shifted beneath Emma's feet. She woke to her phone buzzing, non-stop messages from numbers she didn't recognize, emails flooding her inbox, social media alerts piling one over another like a rising tide. Confused, she opened one. A headline screamed across the screen, a photograph attached beneath it. Nathan Cross seen dining privately with unknown woman. The grainy picture was unmistakable, a blurred shot through a window of her leaning toward Nathan across the candle-lit table. Her stomach dropped. The storm he warned her about had arrived sooner than either of them expected. She scrolled through the article, each word sharper than a blade. Speculation about who she was, guesses about her background. Someone had already found her artist profile, dragging up her failed exhibition as evidence that she was nothing more than a gold digger chasing a billionaire's fortune. Emma's chest tightened as her phone rang again. She nearly ignored it until she saw the caller ID, her landlord. She answered with trembling hands. "Rent's overdue, Emma," he snapped. "Now I see you've found yourself a rich man. Maybe he can cover it for you." The line went dead before she could protest. By the time she arrived at her studio, flashes blinded her. A cluster of photographers swarmed the entrance, shouting her name, mispronouncing it, hurling questions that cut like knives. "How long have you been seeing Nathan Cross? Are you moving into his townhouse? Did you meet his mother at the gala?" She shoved past them, heart racing, her sanctuary violated. Inside the studio, the air reeked of stale coffee and turpentine, but even here she didn't feel safe. The portrait of Nathan still hung on the easel. She stared at it now with new eyes. What had once been her truth, her confession, now looked like evidence in a trial she hadn't agreed to. She wanted to destroy it, rip the canvas to shreds, but she couldn't bring herself to lift the knife. Instead, she collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands as fear and anger warred inside her. The door burst open. Nathan stepped in, his expression grim, his presence filling theirs, a room like a storm cloud. He had bodyguards with him, their eyes scanning the corners like predators. Emma leapt to her feet, fury boiling over. "You said one dinner, Nathan. One chance. Now the whole world knows, and they're tearing me apart." "I didn't leak it," he said, his voice low, controlled, but edged with steel. "Someone followed us. Someone wanted this out." "Who?" Emma demanded. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand, waiting until they were gone. Then he moved closer, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. "There are people inside my company who want to weaken me, rivals who would use anything to wound me. You are their perfect target, Emma, vulnerable, visible, tied to me in a way I can't deny." Her hands shook as she pointed to the portrait. "So what now? Do I destroy this? Do I destroy us?" Nathan's gaze softened for the briefest second before hardening again. "No, they want me to push you away. They want me to show weakness, but I won't. If they come after you, they'll have to go through me." His words should have comforted her, but instead they frightened her more. Because for the first time, Emma realized this wasn't just about scandal or gossip. This was war, and by loving him, she had just been drafted into it. The city seemed sharper, colder in the days that followed. Every corner Emma turned, she felt the weight of eyes on her, strangers, whispering photographers, lurking shadows that seemed to know her name before she even spoke it. Her once quiet studio became a hunting ground where reporters left notes under the door offering money for secrets. Her mother called from another state, her voice trembling with fear and judgment mixed together. "Emma, what have you done? You think men like that save girls like us? They use them, chew them up, and leave them ruined." Emma hung up before the tears could choke her. Nathan tried to shield her, but his world was unraveling too. One evening he arrived at her apartment, his tie undone, his face etched with fury. He tossed a folder onto her table, pages spilling out photographs, and financial reports. "Someone on my board leaked everything, Emma. They are using us. They want to prove I'm distracted, unfit to lead. They think if they tear you apart, they can control me." Emma gathered the papers in trembling hands. One photo froze her blood. It was her at 17, working a part-time job in a diner, the caption beneath it cruel, "From waitress to billionaire's bed." Her past reduced to scandal fodder. She looked at him, pain lacing every word. "They don't even see me as a person. I'm just a headline, a weapon against you." Nathan stepped closer, his hands firm on her shoulders. "You are more than that. You are the only thing that feels real in my life." His voice cracked with a rare vulnerability. "I should let you go, Emma, for your sake, but I can't. I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me." Her breath hitched. The words filled her with warmth and dread all at once. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the pull between them, but fear gnawed at her. "And if I can't survive this, Nathan? What if they break me? What if they break us?" His eyes darkened, his jaw set with grim resolve. "Then I will fight for you until there is nothing left of me. I will not lose you." The air between them sparked heavy with unspoken truths, but just as Emma let herself lean into his embrace, his phone buzzed again. He ignored it at first, but the screen lit up with a name that made her freeze. Victoria. He silenced the call, but the damage was done. A question burned in her chest. Did she know about us before the gala? Did she put me in her sights on purpose? Nathan hesitated too long. Emma pulled back, searching his face, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. He had known more than he ever admitted. The night at the bar, the coincidence of their meeting the way he had found her so easily. A suspicion slithered into her heart, twisting everything she thought she knew. Her voice trembled but cut through the silence like a blade. "Nathan, was that night truly an accident, or did you already know who I was?" The color drained from his face, and for the first time Emma saw fear in him. He opened his mouth to answer, but the knock at the door shattered the moment. Heavy, urgent. Nathan moved toward it, but Emma's mind spun faster than her pulse. If the truth was what she feared, then everything between them might have been built on a lie. The night she thought was a mistake could have been a carefully laid plan, and that realization threatened to break her more than any headline ever could. The knock on the door came again, louder this time, rattling the frame as if the world outside was demanding entry. Nathan signaled for silence, his eyes flashing with a warning. He opened it to reveal one of his security men, rain dripping from his coat, urgency written across his face. "Sir, the press has your location. They're outside the building already, and we believe someone inside the company tipped them off." Nathan cursed under his breath and closed the door, his shoulders tense. Emma stood in the middle of the room, her arms wrapped around herself, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. None of it mattered until he answered her question. She lifted her chin, her voice breaking but steady. "Tell me the truth, Nathan. That night in the hotel bar, was it chance, or was it you?" He froze, and in that pause she already knew. His silence was heavier than a confession. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. "You knew me. You knew my work before that night." Nathan stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "Emma, listen to me. I had seen your paintings months before. I knew your name. The board was considering acquiring a gallery you had submitted to, and I noticed your work. It stayed with me. When I saw you in that bar, broken by the storm, I could not walk away. At first, yes, I went there because of you. But the moment we spoke, everything changed. Nothing about that night was fake." Her throat tightened, the floor tilting beneath her. "So I was never just a stranger. I was an opportunity." "No," Nathan said fiercely, his voice rough. You were a revelation. I wanted to meet the woman behind the art, but what I found was so much more. That night with you was the first time in years I felt like a man instead of a name on a stock report. I fell for you, Emma. Not the idea of you. You. Tears blurred her vision, and yet anger burned hot beneath them. You should have told me. Do you know what it feels like to give yourself to someone only to find out they came with secrets? You made me believe it was fate when it was calculated. Nathan's hands trembled as he reached for her face, but stopped short as if afraid she would recoil. Yes, I made a mistake. But Emma, the way I touched you, the way I listened to you, the way I cannot stop thinking about you, none of that was a lie. I would burn this empire to the ground if it meant keeping you safe. Outside, voices grew louder, shouts echoing down the hallway, reporters pressing closer. Emma looked at Nathan and saw both the billionaire and the man she had kissed in the storm. Her heart ached with the weight of the choice before her. Walk away now. Reclaim her silence, her anonymity, or step fully into his world, knowing it would devour parts of her, but also knowing she could not live without him. She took a slow breath, steadying the storm inside her. I don't care if it was fate or calculation, Nathan. What matters is what we choose now. So tell me, do you choose me or your empire? His eyes glistened with something raw, something unguarded. He stepped forward, his forehead pressed gently against hers, his voice a whisper meant only for her. I choose you, and may the world do its worst. The door burst open, then cameras flashing like lightning, security shouting, chaos flooding in. But Emma did not flinch. Nathan's hand closed firmly around hers, anchoring her as the storm crashed through the walls. Together they stepped into it, not as a mistake, not as a secret, but as two souls reckless enough to believe love was worth every scar it would bring. And for the first time, Emma felt the fire in her chest, steady, fierce, unbreakable. What began as one night of weakness had become the fight of her life, and she knew no matter what waited outside that door, she was no longer alone.